the legendary Brent Musburger.
You are looking live at the Los Angeles Coliseum.
It's Christopher Mad Dog Russo.
I don't know what you can't understand about this. It's pretty obvious.
These two icons will put their talents to the test each week as they go head-to-head and duke it out for gridiron supremacy. You can hear My Guys in the Desert with Brent Musburger weekdays from 6 to 8 Eastern on the Vegas Stats and Information Network, Sirius XM 204.
How are you, my friend? Are you howling, Mad Dog? You sounded good, man.
And you can hear Christopher Mad Dog Russo weekdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on Mad Dog Sports Radio, Sirius XM 82.
For you to sit there is ridiculous. Nobody wants to hear this.
The lines are moving and the money is flying.
Show me the money!
Let the battle begin. Here they are. It's Mad Dog and Musburger.
Yes, indeed. Brent's got the week off of travel, but even better with Vinny. More time to have a chat with him. He runs that casino there at South Point. He's one of the great guys. Helps us with all the lines. And he's done a great job over the last couple of years. Vinny, always a pleasure. How are you today, pal? Okay?
Great to be with you, Mad Dog. Yeah. Personally, had a good Christmas. Happy New Year to you and everyone, your family, and everybody there at Mad Dog Radio.
And I'm making a run at Brent because I went 3-0 last week. I'm only a game back. We'll get to the picks here in a sec.
You got the broom out.
Hot.
I heard it.
Yeah, I got the broom out.
You got the broom out last week, Mad Dog. Yeah.
Is there any activity at your place or on the Strip on Christmas Day for these 5 NBAs, or is it the quietest day of the year?
Morning, quiet. Christmas Eve, rather tapers in the overnight hours. First couple of games, a little bit quiet, Mad Dog. But you know what? As the day goes on, just like Thanksgiving, once family gets, once they start telling their stories and they get enough Chianti in them, as the day passes on, they want to get away from each other, so they wander out. And the evening was much busier than the morning. But now this weekend, of course, big arrivals started last night and today. New Year's weekend, we'll have over 350,000 people, 400,000 people in town for the New Year this year. Yeah, so tremendous.
Wow.
Of course, the Strip gets closed down, on New Year's Eve. So for hours in advance and a couple of hours after, and it's a big celebration.
So in other words, they all flock to the casinos because they can't hang out on the Strip? Is that what they do?
Once the fireworks are done, everybody heads right back into casinos. And these games, they get bet very heavily. And I'll tell you how strong the games are, Mad Dog. These two semifinal games, and I know we'll get into more detail in a minute, but just to give you an idea, folks want to know about Oklahoma and Alabama and Notre Dame Clemson. They'll be bet just like NFL playoff games. Tremendous handle on them, a lot of interest. Folks have already bet them because don't forget, as you saw when you were here, we had them up so that folks that couldn't be here for this weekend got into action on those games in advance, and they tied them to each other and any of the other bowl games that were going on, including weeks 15 and 16 in the NFL. So they've had quite a bit of play already and will continue to be bet very heavily during the course of the weekend.
Notre Dame in this spot, do they bring a lot of extra bettors, the fact that they're the Irish in this semifinal, or is that sort of the Notre Dame fan doesn't bet anyway, so it doesn't count? How about Notre Dame here in the Final Four?
Great question. Tremendous following. And now let's look at that game, how it was bet. It opened 11. Got as high as 3.5 very briefly. It's been all Notre Dame in the last week. The game right now sits at 12 here at the South Point. So Notre Dame money has shown, Mad Dog. There's a few 11.5s out there I see as well. So the other game holding steady, pretty steady with Alabama at 14. Did go down briefly for about a couple of hours last week to 13.5, but it's held pretty steady at 14.
So it's not a Super Bowl bet, but it's a playoff NFL bet, AFL bet, AFC, NFC bet as far as interest is concerned, right?
Yeah, good question. Super Bowl's still the single most wagered event of the year. In fact, last year alone in Nevada, $158 million on the Super Bowl and its action. These games will be bet like the NFL playoff games. Now, the next question people ask us all the time is, what if they expand the playoff? Well, then you'll just have, instead of 3 games, now you'll have 7 games, and they'll all be bet just like NFL playoff games.
I just had Danielson on. You know, he comes on every week, and I made the point to him that with the two great games 4 days before New Year's Eve, you know, you bet these two games, you're almost a little burned out of college football, and you stay away for 9 days as a fan into the championship game. Do you see a real dropping off of gambling of the next 3 days because the two semifinal games are before New Year's Eve and New Year's Day? What do you see there, Vin?
Nope. So the 30th. Again, Monday, where those 6 games, they'll be back. Because here's the thing, the people are here, right, Mad Dog? And then you got, of course, New Year's Day. So the people are here. The games are up. They loved it. Once they're here, and again, as I mentioned, 350 to 400,000 people in town, the fact that these games are going to be the focus of the sports betting world, there is no let-up at all. No matter what happens in the semifinal games, folks will either, if they're flush, they'll press up, they'll go even stronger, but they'll always find money and be in action, especially with New Year's Day, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day.
All right, the Sunday NFL slate is always a very tricky game to bet and a very tricky game for you guys to lay the lines on because you just don't know how some of these teams are going to handle it as far as if it means anything to them, if it doesn't mean, like how the Bears are going to play it. I mean, how are the, you know, I mean, there's a perfect example. You know, the Chargers, if the Chiefs get off to a big lead. These are very hard games to bet as a bettor, and these are very hard games, I would think, to set the lines Week 17 of the NFL when there's a lot of teams that might be in it and teams that might be not be in it who play against each other. How do you handle that?
Terrific point, Mad Dog. By the way, there were matchups this weekend, 6-week games this Sunday that were the same matchup from a year ago. By the way, and the favorites went 5-1.
Really?
4-1
matchups in the division? Wow,
right.
I didn't know that.
Yep,
okay.
in Week 17. Now, it's a little bit tricky, so here's how we handle it. Games are going to move. Numbers are going to move a lot quicker. I mean, we kind of have an idea of who's going, you know, who's got something at stake. I'm glad. One thing that helped our side of the counter, Mad Dog, was when the NFL said, look, there's no advantage. There's not going to be an advantage, right? There's not going to be a correlation situation in existence. So whoever's got something at stake, everybody's going to play at the same time if they impact each other. Because what would happen in the past, years ago, what we would have to do, and it wasn't so many years ago, just a few years ago till the NFL did this, we'd have to take the afternoon games or a great number of them off the board. Because it depended on what happened in the morning, how they were going to, you know, the teams were going to fare in the afternoon in terms of their strategies. So now that they're all playing together, now they're all going to be scoreboard watching, we can leave the games up that have not played yet, that have not started yet, and that's good for the bettors too because they want to be in action and people can be betting while the other games are going on, and we don't have to have any downtime. But everybody's in the same boat. We try to, you know, we just found out today, obviously, right, that Breeze looks like he's not going to go. And here's what pros are going to start looking at, Mad Dog. They're going to keep watching. The pros won't get involved until Sunday, right before kickoff, once things start getting announced, and they start looking at the inactive list, not the active list, but the inactive list in Week 17.
Wow, now I'd also think the Colts and Titans is the last game of the year, Sunday night. That game, although it means a lot, those are weird markets. I would think not bet as heavily as most other Sunday night Week 17 weeks. Is that correct?
Again, the population in town, the visitation.
They got nothing else to do, so they bet the games.
Absolutely, and it's the folk. Oh, and by the way, right, both these teams have something at stake, so that's what's really good about it. I'm glad that it happens to be the game where both sides have something on the line here. So they flexed it and put it there at 5:20 Pacific, and it's a great start time for us. Think about that. You know, even back east, the folks that are betting in New Jersey, and Pennsylvania,
right.
So, you know,
and New Year's Eve is sort of a light work day, so they can get into the game and not have to worry about.
Exactly.
All right, we got a lot to do. I was 3-0. Brent was 1-2, so I'm only a game back. So I get first cracks at it. Week 17.
Here we go.
National Football League. I start, Vin, because I had an opportunity with the decent week last week. We obviously continue the contest throughout the postseason, so if I don't make it up this week, maybe I'll get lucky in the next, whatever it might be, 11 games. I'm going to start with the Colts against Tennessee. The 3.5 would scare me. Vinny's got it at the lines here, week 17 at 3.
-3.
So
yeah.
I'm gonna take Indianapolis at -3. I think the Titans will probably play better than you think. They'll run the ball. They're due to beat the Colts. It's been 10 straight times they've lost to them. Obviously, Mariota, you got to figure he'll play. But I'm just not going to bet against Andrew Luck. That's the bottom line. They got the better quarterback. I think they're a little better team. They buried him in week whatever it was earlier in the year in Indy. And I think I can't bet against the great quarterback in a big spot against Tennessee. I could be burned by the spread. This game's going to be close. And 3.5 does worry me, but it's only 3 with Vin. I'll take the Colts in game 1 against the Titans to make the playoffs out of the AFC. That's pick number 1.
Solid. And the healthier quarterback. Solid pick, Mad Dog. All right, Brent's first pick. We're going to go with the Vikings. Vikings -4.5. And listen, we know that the Bears are already in the playoffs. This is probably a preview of a playoff matchup in the first round, the way things are going to play out. But that game is going to be at Soldier Field. Can't imagine that the Bears are going to do a whole lot to show the Vikings very many things. It was a game very early in this season. Actually, it was a preseason game between the Raiders and the Rams. Neither team wanted to show anybody anything. Why? Because they were going to play each other within a month's time. This is a playoff game we're talking about down the road. But that said, Vikings at home with a lot more at stake here to get into the postseason. Vikings -4.5.
All right, that's Brent's number 1. I'm going to take Kansas City. I just think the Raiders, off a short week, Christmas Eve, that was a statement game for them to show a little progress. Maybe the last ever game in Oakland, who knows? They buried Denver. Now they're going on to the middle of the country where Brent's going. They're getting 13.5, but a lot's at stake for the Chiefs. The Raiders played them tough in that earlier game about a month ago. I don't know if they'll be as tough now. I don't love Andy Reid late in the season, and 2 touchdowns is a plenty, but I don't know what's in the tank for the Raiders. They got to win against Denver. They beat Pittsburgh. Progress is being made. I don't know if they're going to be that motivated to hurt the Chiefs and help San Diego in the AFC. So I'll take the Chiefs. I'll give up 13.5. Game number 2.
You're right, Mad
Brent
Dog.
and Vinny.
That was a big emotional win the other night by the Raiders. All right, number 2 pick, the Packers -8. Listen, Rodgers played last week on the road, right? There's no reason to think he's not going to play this week at home. The Lions, very poor performance, especially on the road these last few games. No reason to think that Rodgers won't play. I mean, he played the whole game last week. They were down by, double digits? And he played in overtime to win it. Rodgers and the Packers -8 at home against the Lions, who have far more injuries and are way out of sync than the Packers. Brent's number 2 pick, the Packers -8.
Yeah, I can see that. That's a good one. I'm going to take the Eagles against the Redskins at 6.5. I just don't know. The Redskins had some off-the-field issues this week with the safety who knocked the defensive coordinator and got released. They put everything in the tank last week. Were relatively competitive against Tennessee. They got knocked out of the postseason. There's a lot of issues in that area for their football team. They don't sell out. There'll be nobody in the game. They only average about 70,000 in a big stadium. They hate the owner. I don't think that community is bonded with the team right now. I think they can't wait for the season to get over with. And the Eagles have a lot to play for. Maybe they get a little break watching the scoreboard. I'll take the Eagles giving up almost a touchdown with Foles in D.C. in game number 3.
Solid. Very solid, Mad Dog. All right, Brent's number 3 pick. The Bills at home, -3.5 against the Dolphins. Lame duck coach, lame duck quarterback down in Miami. They've not done particularly well against the Bills. I'm not going with the weather factor here, although it does certainly favor the Bills. But I will tell you this, Bills on the upswing. Defense is still playing very hard. I know the Dolphins do have some playmakers, but I will tell you this, the Bills at home in this game, especially if they get up early, I don't see the Dolphins hanging around. So the Bills, number 3 at -3.5, Mad Dog.
All right there, Vinny. You just heard Brent's picks through Vin with the Packers and the Bills and, of course, the Vikings. Me going the other way with Kansas City against the Raiders. I'm going to take a run at the Eagles, and I like the Indy team on the Sunday night. Does the NBA and the NHL, they take a big back seat now at the bettors, correct? It's all football here for the next couple of weeks, Vin?
For the most part. The general public get involved with the Lakers, even though LeBron is out. But I'll tell you who zeroes in on college basketball, the NBA, and the NHL professionals. Because here's the thing, Mad Dog, and you realize this when you were here a couple of weeks back. We've got to put up all these games, but as bettors, you don't have to bet every one of them. So you get to zero in, particularly on college basketball. Some very sharp and respected opinions that are going to zero in on college basketball, especially this time of year.
Wow. Are you busy? Is South Point jammed on New Year's Eve? I mean, 5 a.m., there's people, it's 2 a.m. local time. People are running around, and your place is, no games, but your place is popping, right?
Yep. Yeah, here's the thing. Not just about the sports book and the race book. Once the games are done, and of course, but here's the thing: people can bet all night long. This is 24-hour sports book here at the South Point. But the fact of the matter is, all the machines are available. The table games, there's added table games carried over from when the rodeo was here last week. So it's 24/7. There's some places where casinos do close, but not here. In Las Vegas, his South Point will be open 24/7. People, you know what? It's funny. People say, "Hey, Vinny, is it true that the job is 24/7?" I tell them, "No, that's an exaggeration. It's 25/8."
Vinny, Happy New Year. Always a pleasure. We'll talk to you next week.
Take care,
Take care, pal.
All right, buddy.
You got.
All right. When we come back, you heard the picks. We'll recap them between Musburger and Mad Dog when we return here on VSiN. Welcome back, Mad Dog and Musburger. I always have a good time with that segment. I have to say it. Brent and Christopher Mad Dog Russo going head-to-head all season long. It looks like it's going to come down to Week 17. What is there, a half game separating the two? So let's recap the picks. I know you had a question, Jorge, but let's recap. So Mad Dog, who was on the tee box first, he went 3-0 last week. He took the Colts -3, the Chiefs -13.5, and the Eagles -6.5. Brent's picks for this week: the Vikings -4.5 against the Bears, the Packers -8, and the Bills -3.5. And I mentioned something during that segment, Jorge. You wanted me to follow up on. What was your question?
Yeah, Vinny, you talked about the 6 matchups.
Yeah.
What were the 6 matchups, and as bettors, what do we take from that, if anything?
Well, let me give you the 6 match a year ago. Packers at the Lions a year ago, and the Lions prevailed 35-11 as 7-point favorites. Bills against the Dolphins. That one was in Miami. The Bills were favored. Remember, Bills were a playoff team a year ago. They were a field goal favorite, 22-16 Bills. Jets in New England to play the Patriots. Patriots 15 to 16-point favorites. They win 26-6. Bears at the Vikings. Of course, Vikings were much stronger last year. Bears were not as strong, and they're the prevailing favorite here. Depending on where you got this game, it ended 23-10 Vikings. The consensus line was 12.5. Cardinals at the Seahawks. Seahawks were 8.5, and the Cardinals prevailed there 26-24. Of course, the Seahawks were not in the playoffs a year ago. And the Niners-Rams in Los Angeles. Rams did not have anything to play for in that game, as I recall. In fact, they were a slight favorite, but they were bet up to 6. Actually, the Niners went off the favorite in that game, and the Niners prevailed 34-13. So some of the same matchups. All right, but listen again. We'll recap them one more time. Mad Dog: Colts -3, Chiefs -13.5, Eagles -6.5. That was Christopher Mad Dog Russo's picks. Brent Musburger: Vikings -4.5, Packers -8, Bills -3.5. When we come back after a break at the top of the hour, my guys in the desert. I'll be joined by Dave Farah, Amal Shah. We've got several guests. We'll go over today's action and all the weekend's action right here on My Guys in the Desert, VSiN, Sirius XM 204.